Good evening and welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I'm Vishnu Shom. On the show tonight, a key order by the Allahabad High Court which has ruled that a survey of the Gyanvapi site in Varanasi by the Archaeological Survey was warranted in the interest of justice is the day's big story. The Gyanvapi Mosque committee has now gone to the Supreme Court challenging this order. The High Court has directed the Archaeological Survey to find out whether the present structure has been built over a pre-existing structure of a Hindu temple, a claim that the petitioners in the case have made. Now, on the show tonight, we'll break down the details of the case for you, the legal arguments, what will now happen. Is this a part of majoritarian politics, as has been alleged? And ultimately, we ask a basic question. In a country with a tradition and history as rich and ancient as ours, how long can you literally, physically keep digging to uncover the past? Also a reminder at 9:30 p.m. this evening, an exclusive interview with Peter Elbers, the CEO of Indigo, on the airline's record quarterly results, to safety concerns, reports of range limits on incoming A321XLR aircraft, to a question which a lot of us want to know, will there ever be in-flight entertainment systems on Indigo? This at a time when the airline places or has placed a record order for 500 jets from Airbus, beating the previous record just set by Air India of a whopping 470 aircraft. One way or the other, Indian aviation is booming. Can this be sustained? And perhaps more significantly, can it be sustained safely? But that's later on. The big development as far as the Allahabad High Court order on the Gyanvapi property is concerned, well, there is a nod to the Archaeological Survey of India, which has now said that a scientific survey is necessary of the Gyanvapi site in the interest of justice. The High Court says a survey will aid in a just decision from the trial court. The High Court says there is no substance in the argument that the structure will be damaged. The Archaeological Survey of India affidavit says that no excavation will be carried out. The Mosque Committee has now moved the Supreme Court against this order, and the Mosque Committee says that the structure could be harmed during the survey. So that's the contentious point which the Archaeological Survey of India disagrees with. The ASI, the Archaeological Survey, says there will be no excavation, only photographs and studies done by radar. Now the Archaeological Survey actually will now start just tomorrow, so it will start immediately after this order. Now, as we look at these developments today, the question which a lot of our viewers may want to know is, why are we debating just a survey being done by the Archaeological Survey of India? Is it not the role of the Archaeological Survey of India to conduct such surveys? Well, the issue is about the Places of Worship Act 1991. It was brought in by the Narasimha Rao government. It prohibits conversion of places of worship, right? Now in this case it's the Gyanvapi Masjid which is the place of worship which is in question right now. This effort by the Archaeological Survey, it is argued, is step one of changing the basic nature of this place of worship, which some argue finds itself in contradiction to the 1991 law. We'll talk a lot about it. That law preserves the religious character of sites such as Gyanvapi as on the 15th of August 1947. So therefore you may be asking, but one moment, what about Babri Masjid, and what about the Ram temple now being constructed there? How did the law exclude that? Well, the law did exclude Ayodhya, which was a pre-independence title dispute, not post-independence, which the 1991 law looks at, and which some suggest the Gyanvapi issue falls under. Now the BJP has opposed the Places of Worship Act in 1991. There is a fresh plea in the Supreme Court which has challenged the act. So irrespective of what happens immediately with Gyanvapi, it's going to be a long time before there is an eventual decision, some would suggest, on this case. Now in just the run up to today's verdict, there have been some important statements which have come in. This is the Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath.
ज्ञानवापी काशी विश्वनाथ मंदिर, इस प्रॉब्लम का कोई सोल्यूशन है?
अगर हम उसको मस्जिद कहेंगे तो फिर विवाद होगा। मुझे लगता है कि भगवान ने जिसको दृष्टि दी है वो देखे ना, त्रिशूल मस्जिद के अंदर क्या कर रहा है। हमने तो नहीं रखे ना। ज्योतिर्लिंग हैं, देव प्रतिमाएं हैं, पूरी दीवारें चिल्ला चिल्ला के क्या कह रही हैं। और मुझे लगता है कि ये प्रस्ताव मुस्लिम समाज की तरफ से आना चाहिए कि साहब ऐतिहासिक गलती हुई है और उस गलती के लिए हम चाहते हैं समाधान हो।
And a year back, Mohan Bhagwat had made an interesting remark when he said that, or he seemed to suggest that a process to look for a shivling in every masjid, is that necessarily what can realistically be done, or should it be done? Listen in.
अभी ये प्रकरण निकल रहे, ज्ञानवापी का मुद्दा चल रहा है। अब ऐसे मुद्दे हैं, एक इतिहास तो है, उसको हम बदल नहीं सकते। वो इतिहास हमने नहीं बनाया, न आज के अपने आप को हिंदू कहलाने वालों ने बनाया, न आज के मुसलमानों ने बनाया। उस समय घटा, ठीक है, प्रतीकात्मक कुछ हमारी विशेष श्रद्धा थी, ऐसे स्थानों के बारे में हमने कहा, लेकिन रोज एक मामला निकालना नया, ये भी नहीं करना चाहिए। हमको झगड़ा क्यों बढ़ाना है? ज्ञानवापी के बारे में हमारी कुछ श्रद्धाएं हैं, परंपरा से चलती आई, हम कर रहे, ठीक है, परंतु हर मस्जिद में शिवलिंग क्यों देखना?
So is there a need to look for a shivling beneath every masjid? That's what the RSS chief said last year, but there is an important verdict by the Allahabad High Court. It starts the process of a survey, nothing more, nothing less than that. So let's analyze what the High Court has done and look at the larger ramifications of this case. The senior BJP leader, spokesperson of the party, senior Supreme Court lawyer, Nalin Kohli with us. Now, Nalin, the High Court today has said that a survey was necessary for justice. I think those were the words which were used. How would you respond to those who say that justice is based on preserving the character of existing places of worship?
In a democracy, and that's what the Constitution gives us that right, Vishnu, is that everyone is entitled to a point of view and see the same thing from different perspectives. Now, Vishnu, what we are looking at here is a legal process. So let's break it down. Under the Constitution, everyone has rights. There is a defined legal process. That legal process is not political, it's not emotional, it's a legal process. Now, if someone invokes the court of law, the court of law has to see that whatever has come in the nature of a suit, or if an application, or if at a higher court like the Supreme Court or the High Courts, a writ petition, is it something that is permissible under the constitutional scheme or the statutes under which it has come, and adjudicate on that. Now, what today's order of the High Court is, it's about an order under the CPC, the Code of Civil Procedure, permitting a scientific investigation.
Right.
Now, Order 26, Rule 10A, makes it possible for someone to move an application before a court of law and say, kindly conduct a scientific investigation. That is part of the CPC. Someone has moved an application on that. That application is opposed by another group. It comes up in appeal before the Honorable Court, which is the Allahabad High Court, and the Allahabad High Court has to see, is this permissible under law or not? Nothing more, nothing less.
Right.
So their judgment is absolutely correct. It can't be the arguments of my apprehension, or it should be this, or my desire has no place. It has to be based on law.
No, I understand that, Nalin. And obviously the court was asked, can we carry out a survey? The court decided that on the basis of what exists, you can carry out a survey, right? Okay, fair enough. However, a basic question, this goes clearly beyond just the survey itself. This is, some would suggest, most would suggest, an assertion of Hindu rights, which is one thing. But in a country with a history as ancient as ours, how long do we physically keep digging? In the words of Mohan Bhagwat ji, should we be looking for a shivling in every mosque?
So you have actually asked 3 questions. So let me answer each one separately. I'm getting a feedback, Vishnu, so if you can request your panel to stop the reverse feedback. Thank you. So you've asked basically 3 questions. I'll approach each one separately. Question number 1 is related to the fact that Hindu rights, I think rights of Indians is how the Constitution puts it. Under the same Constitution, a Muslim can say, I have Muslim rights, but actually they are rights of him from his perspective, And the same would be applied to a Hindu or a Buddhist or a Parsi or a Jew or anyone else who's an Indian citizen. There can't be a denial of rights because somebody is either a Muslim or a Hindu. So can it be argued just because a Hindu has gone in and filed, or a set of Hindus have gone in and filed a suit, that this is majorityism? I would reject that at the outset. Everyone in this country, irrespective of their religion, can approach a court of law on something that they believe they have a case on and have the court adjudicate on it. There can't be a prevention because someone is a Hindu for being the majority, or there can't be a prevention for someone being a Muslim for being a minority as compared to the Hindus. So that's point number one. Point number two, you picked up the statement of Mohan Bhagwat. Now certainly it can be argued by some that we don't need to look at every masjid. But certainly there would be some who would argue that some of them would be significant to Hindu cause. And therefore can there be a prevention on it? Let's take the third aspect, which is say the Places of Worship Act. Nothing is cast in stone. The Constitution itself is a living document. The Constitution also has been amended over 100 times. So an act of parliament is through the constitutional process. An act may be repealed, may be modified, may not be touched also. This is all the correct thing. So I don't think these arguments should be built on the basis, and as a practicing lawyer, I'm very clear, you can't bring in the emotional side when you're dealing with law. The emotional arguments have their own place. They are outside the courts. They can't be within the courts, and the courts can't be expected to adjudicate on the basis of that.
But Nalin, let's look at the 1991 Places of Religious Worship Act. It may not exist in the future, it may exist, we don't know that. But for the moment, you and I are bound to respect that. Why? Because it exists. It's the law. Now this says the 1991 Places of Religious Worship Act prohibits conversion of any place of worship and seeks to provide for the maintenance of the religious character of any place of worship as it existed on 15th August 47 and for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. The question that's asked is, does an archaeological survey change the religious character of a place of worship?
So let's go one by one and break it down. And I'm Vishnu, with humility I say this, I'm trying to approach it as much as I can, keeping the court in mind, because I think every sensitive issue,
I'm quoting the judgment.
Yes, I understand. So the first point is, Vishnu, that this is not a suit under that act. This is a suit where some people have raised a right to worship. Now let's go it from another. There are those who would argue that within a mosque there is no place for idol worship, there is no place for idols, there is no place for a trishul. We've heard that other interview too. So there are perspectives and counter perspectives to anything. For a moment, forget the issue at hand and let's take it to a family dispute. Say between a family, two members of a family, there would be equally two separate perspectives that may not be apparently meeting, but there would be truth in various aspects of that entire dispute. Now let's come back to the issue here. The next issue is on an emotional side, moving aside. Sometimes the easiest way is to look at the truth and acknowledge the truth and then start looking at it further. What we currently have is, and as you would see it in the judgment, it's a well-written judgment, and the judgment has fairly looked at all the arguments put forth by everyone. So the question that comes before the court is not whether or not the ASI can be permitted to do it. The ASI can be entrusted to do it in a proper way under the CPC, which is what has happened. Now the denial of that right is on arguments that are not holding. For example, that the excavation may damage the structure. ASI is saying responsibly that we will not do an excavation. Modern technology is available today. We have seen it in as far as the pyramids, that you can go down deep into the pyramids without sending a person break. So what's the so therefore this is about it.
No, right, absolutely. I completely concur. If the ASI is given on affidavit, they're using a radar and photographs, they're not going to be digging, then that's that. It's as clear as that. Court is judge, not you and me. However, I'm looking at the larger issue, right, based entirely on the law. Another judgment. Even the Babri judgment concludes that the Places of Worship Act impose, and I quote, imposes a non-derogable obligation towards enforcing our commitment to secularism under the Indian Constitution. This may just be a survey, but again, how would you respond to those who say that the basic nature of secularism, I'm introducing the word secularism here, is being challenged?
I've understood.
Is being challenged.
Sure. So let's keep the word secularism aside for a moment and let's come to the core of your question. The core of your question is, after the survey, what happens with respect to the Worships Act, 1991 Act, as also you have referred to the Babri judgment. Now in both of them I'm saying these are premature. Today that is not the issue. That issue a court will adjudicate as and when it presents itself. And therefore, to say that the entire process on a basis of an assumption or a presumption, what is legally permissible today should not happen, I don't know under which law that is going to be prevented. And on what basis the court should do so, then how will a court function? Therefore, why can't this be extended to, say, personal law? Why can't this be extended to commercial law? To anything. You can't do that on the basis of what may happen. What the court will see is what has happened or what the application seeks that should happen. And therefore, I don't see scope of that argument today. It is premature. It is without cause. When and if and when there is a cause, that can come up and the courts will look at it. So I don't think that's today. Now let's come to the word secularism.
Yeah, go ahead. No, yes, that was my question. Go ahead.
So there is no adjudication on it yet, no? That's why I'm saying. Now you can move in various formats. Now let's come to the word secularism. That itself, over the last at least 25, 30 years that I've been politically aware and involved, I find that secularism is defined and perceived by so many people in so many ways. There are a set of people who say that the protection of minority rights is secularism. There are others who say that the majority, in this case Hindus, their identity cannot be second class because they happen to be Hindus. There are third who say that the state must be religious. The state cannot profess an act which is religious in nature. The fourth says that the state must interfere in religious, which is an argument taken when management of temples come, and others say that this is not permitted. So secularism as a concept means different things to different people. As far as I'm concerned, for me personally, the Constitution gives us a set of rights as Indian citizens. We are first Indian citizens, then we are any religion or denomination or whatever. Those rights have to be preserved by the courts of law. This is what the governments run off, and therefore in that the state cannot do something that is per se religious at the cost of going against the Constitution. I see it in that perspective, others see it in a different perspective, and why not? That's what even our Constitution permits us to do.
So here's a technical question, and I really don't know what the answer here is. The mosque's Wazukhana, where a structure
I might also not.
No, so your opinion. The mosque's Wazukhana, where a structure claimed by the Hindu litigants to be a shivling exists, will not be a part of the survey. Why? Because there's an earlier Supreme Court order protecting that spot in the complex. I am trying to understand what is the significance of the earlier Supreme Court order in the context of what has been decided today, because this is a key part of the complex, right? The Wazukhana area where the shivling apparently exists.
First, Vishnu, if there is an order of a court, in this case no less than the Honorable Supreme Court of India, any interference or disobedience or not adhering to that protection or order of the court would invite perhaps a contempt or invite action or at least scrutiny at the very least. Therefore, I think those who would be, in this case the ASI and its legal team, I'm sure would understand what needs to be done and what cannot be done, because ultimately they are conducting this scientific investigation under Order 26 Rule 10A on an order of the court. So I don't think anyone would interfere with an order of the court. If that area is prevented from any kind of survey or anything for the moment, that may remain pending and the others may happen. Sure. So I don't see any conflict or any risk.
All right, Nalin, as always, thank you very much for this deep dive into various orders and judgments and where this is all going. Appreciate it. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, joining us now, Hilal Ahmed, Assistant Professor at CSDS. Thanks, Hilal, very much for being with us. Again, a deep dive into your interpretation of what's happening today, what it's a part of, legally where this could be going. So my first question, the High Court has said the District Court order is just and proper and therefore no interference is warranted. It's also said that the survey was necessary for justice, right? How would you respond to what happened today?
In my view, I think one sentence that puzzles me is this, that scientific survey could be the legitimate basis to ensure justice. I think this is actually a problematic position. Why? Because it is a rigid and I would say positivist interpretation of justice. We cannot say that anything, the veracity of any claim can be ascertained by using scientific techniques, especially if it is related to any historical building or, for that matter, a monument. So my first apprehension about is that it's a very limited interpretation of justice, which I think going to create a lot of problems. One. My second impression is, which is equally problematic, that the purpose of Archaeological Survey of India is not to determine, the veracity of the claim in relation to mosque temple disputes. It is, it is meant for protecting historical heritage, which we have, and at the same time, try to excavate new things in order to contribute to what we already know. So in that sense, ASI, the purpose of ASI is to do actually two things. One, conservation, and second is excavation. Interpretation or the judgment of this kind actually poses us a challenge, as if that conservation of historical sites is it will create conflict of excavation. It means that if you want to know the truth, you have to just destroy the structure and get into this. Now, this is a very, very dangerous and problematic proposition in my opinion.
Hilal, the 1991 Places of Religious Worship Act prohibits conversion of any place of worship in Sikhs, and I quote, to provide for the maintenance of the religious character of any place of worship as it existed in August 1947, etc., etc. Now, does an Archaeological Survey of India survey change the religious character of a place of worship? Because some would suggest that, look, it's just photographs and radar being used. How does it change the character of anything?
I think we have to also look at, because what you just read, I think we also look at the two very important caveat that was there in 1991 Act. One, that it was not applicable to the disputed site called Ram Mandir Babri Masjid complex. Second is that it was not applicable on all the monuments protected by Archaeological Survey of India. Now, these two things were, obviously any law, it does not mean that you cannot challenge a law and we know that, that is also going on at the moment. But law always exists, law does not exist in a vacuum. In order to become meaningful, you should have a positive politics of some kind. And because we do not have that positive politics at the moment, and that's the reason why, the technicalities which were actually inherent in 1991 law are going to be used by different parties to create new claims. And this is what we are going to see in future.
Hilal, even the Babri judgment concludes that the Places of Worship Act imposes a non-derogable obligations towards enforcing our commitment to secularism under our constitution. Is it your belief that secularism as a concept is ultimately what is being challenged here?
I'm glad you are asking this question, because now where is secularism? Secularism actually has reduced to only court judgment. So for instance, Karnataka High Court judgment in relation to hijab also evokes the term called secularism. Yeah. But secularism has completely disappeared from our public life. No political party would say that it is a question of secularism. So therefore, there is a difference between the public discussion in relation to secularism and the technicalities related to law, which are the interpretation of secularism given by the courts. What is interesting is that we find a big gap between these two. On the one hand, secularism is completely gone and it has not yet been replaced by any other new term or any concept which can challenge the non-secular. On the other hand, the technicalities are used very strategically in the realm of law. So therefore, the point I'm trying to make is simply this, that we should have a positive politics of secularism, which is completely absent at the moment. And that's why, you do not find any the non-BJP parties are completely silent on this question, because they do not have anything to say with regard to that. In 1991-92, they had an option to say that this is called communalism and the answer to communalism is secularism. Now, the discourse of secularism is completely gone, and unfortunately, we do not have any new term in order to say that what is happening is wrong and we propose something constructively new.
Hilal, how profound is this survey going to be in any case? Because the key area, the Wazukhana of the mosque, that is where a structure claimed by Hindu litigants to be a shivling apparently exists, won't be part of the survey at all because of a previous Supreme Court order. So whatever is taking place today, without that core evidence, would you suggest that it's essentially, or would you agree that it's essentially restricted?
See, obviously a survey is survey, and it is actually a very technical question. We don't know what they are going to do inside, what kind of method they are going to use. But technically, you are right. That area is obviously cordoned off and it is protected by that judgment. But therefore, it does not stop. By the way, we have to remember the now location of Gyanvapi. Gyanvapi is situated in the larger scheme of things. So the urban landscape of that temple complex is completely changed. It's entirely a temple in which you have got Gyanvapi and in which there is something called Vazukhana. So the technical issues, you and I will not be able to determine what the ASI is going to do with regard to the techniques they are going to evolve. For instance, remember in Babri Masjid case, Babri Masjid was a non-functional thing. It was a non-functional mosque. Gyanvapi is a functional mosque. And you have to do a survey while a place is in use. So all these technicalities will be, I don't know about that, but we have to wait and watch what kind of survey they are going to do.
Hilal, one final question, beyond the specifics of the survey or beyond what has taken place in the Allahabad High Court today, do you believe that this order takes us down a path that allows a change in the character of Gyanvapi? And does this therefore give way to majoritarian politics in India, majoritarian politics which changes our basic identity as Indians in terms of our culture and our faith and of living together with very different cultures and faiths and yet living all together?
I prefer not to use the term majoritarianism because I find it, it is a very easy term to describe the nature of politics which we observe. Instead, I would say that it is something which I call Hindutva constitutionalism. Using constitutional means legal constitutional discourse in order to create a legitimacy for the larger Hindutva project. And this is precisely what this, the whole issue of the technicalities related with Gyanvapi will eventually contribute. So Hindutva constitutionalism rests on basically three things. One, that a distinction is made between the larger principles of law and the technicalities. The importance is given to technicalities, not the principles. This is what we can just observe in this case. Second is, and that's why majoritarianism is not a good word, because Hindutva constitutionalism gives priority to the idea of minority and victimhood. So the entire discourse is not that we are majority, rather Hindus are suffering over the years, and that's why it will contribute to Hindu victimhood. And finally, one nation, one law. That's the third feature of Hindutva constitutionalism. So in my view, the politics of Hindutva constitutionalism will continue, and unfortunately, non-BJP parties are not in a position to respond to it.
All right, Hilal, thanks very much for joining us again. Our goal on this, less of a debate, more of a discussion, both sides, complex legal arguments, linked to the constitution, interpretation of the law, religious sentiment. It all comes together as it has in the past with the Ram Janambhoomi Babri Masjid issue. It's all come together once again as far as Gyanvapi is concerned. But like in the case of the Babri Masjid issue, it is going to be a long legal battle. It might take years, and there are laws which need to be looked at very, very closely indeed. We leave it over here. Coming up next, a very special interview with the CEO of Indigo, his first long format sit-down interview since that record order of 500 aircraft by Indigo. We talk about everything from flight safety to the future of the airline. Well, it is India's largest airline, and it is an airline that has done remarkably well in the recent past. Indigo has just announced its quarterly results. The numbers are fairly staggering. Revenue from operations is up at 29.8%. The load factor is at 88.6%. That's up from 79.6% last time around. Profit significantly for the airline is up at 236%. Now, these are just statistics, but the story of Indigo as it continues to grow in this hyper-competitive market, which is the Indian civil aviation sector, is something which is truly remarkable. We've got a very special guest, the CEO of Indigo, Mr. Peter Elbers. Thanks very much, Mr. Elbers, for being with us. First question, is it pent-up demand that we are seeing, which has resulted in so many more passengers on your flights, or is this finally a return to normal, which obviously we didn't see during the COVID period?
Good evening, yeah, thank you so much for having me, and obviously a happy and pleased CEO is sitting in front of you if we can announce these results. To your question, really, we see that the market actually is back, and not only this quarter. This is our third consecutive quarter. We are back into the black numbers, and the Indian market is probably one of the quickest markets in the world recovering post-COVID, and is now having numbers and posting numbers for the overall market, which is significantly higher than the situation prior to COVID. So I wouldn't call it pent-up demand. That may have been the case by the end of 22. I think today here we really see a combination of a Indian economy which is doing very, very well. Foreign investments in India, Indians going abroad, Indians going for study, family and friends, local business which is growing, and that all comes together in a very strong traffic demand. And basically at Indigo, I think we're in a good position to benefit of that strong market and see the result of many of the actions and initiatives which we have taken over the past year.
Mr. Elbers, you know, when it comes to Indigo, there are so many questions which so many of our viewers want to know. And so I thought we'd ask you fairly basic questions, get your answers in on them. So my first question is this: is Indian aviation essentially headed, in your opinion, for a duopoly type situation, Indigo and an expanded Air India?
Well, Indian aviation is obviously going through a transition phase. And again, here, I think we should have a little bit more of a global view almost. And of course, we're here in India itself, and we look at it from an Indian perspective. But if you take a step back for a moment and you see that the most populous nation on the planet, in fact, should have airlines which are representing the size of that population and representing the size of that economy. And the consolidation which is now taking place partly under the Air India group, and of course the growth of Indigo itself, is actually what we have seen in other parts in the world, where larger players emerge. And these larger players need to be large in order to compete, and in order to be able to compete with some of the mega carriers in the world. And the share, and I'm sorry I'm taking a bit of time for this answer, but the relative share of Indian carriers on international traffic is still relatively limited. And in order to regain some of that share, we need to grow, and we need to have a sizable presence. And there, the combination of a strong domestic network with a growing international network will help us to compete, and will make sure that the Indian carriers can regain some of that international share.
Has Indigo benefited by the collapse of Go First? And I ask because you've got aircraft more readily available than perhaps any other airline, and at the same time you want to attract the talent which exists in that airline. In other words, pilots who operate the same aircraft, cabin crew, potentially engineers as well. So is this something which has come, as a benefit to you at a time when you're trying to grow?
Well, overall, I would say the suspension of the flights of Go First, of course, created some sudden disruption in the market and sudden disruption of capacity. Having said that, Indigo today operates almost 500 routes, a little over 400 domestic and some 80 to 90 international. If we look to that domestic network, the overlap, if you look at Go First, what percentage of our domestic routes were also operated by Go First, it's below 20%. So when it comes to that market, I think Indigo by now is covering so many routes that we basically continue to build on that strong market position. When it comes to the labor markets, again here, India, very different than some other parts of the world, is really in a position where there's still a lot of potential out in the market and a lot of actually new people joining the labor market and youngsters looking for jobs. And we have a fantastic training institute at Indigo. We train about 2,000 people a day for the growth of our airline. So yes, we have seen some moves from Go First, but I would say the core of what we're doing at Indigo is still provided by our internal training program and our internal training center.
Would you have a number of people who have come in from Go First?
No, I would not be able to have a precise number. There's always fluctuations in the market, so I would not be able to have a precise number. But again, we are expecting to hire in the range of 5,000 people this year. So look at the size of what we are doing. We train 2,000 a day for different programs. So again, here the Go First people joining. That I wouldn't have a precise number, but if we look to the total scale of growth we're growing, it's the majority of our growth is coming from outside anyway.
There have been recent concerns, Mr. Elbers, on security and safety, and that obviously is your primary concern as an airline. You've been fined recently. A couple of your pilots have had suspensions as well. Tail strikes, I think 4 in 6 months. Should passengers be concerned? A basic question.
Well, let me reiterate where you started with. Safety is our key priority. Number 1, number 2, and number 3 on our priority is, and will continue to be safety. And Indigo has actually a very strong track record when it comes to safety. Then we had the 4 tail strikes over this past 6 months. These tail strikes are to be reported, and we're fully transparent on that part. So there's no hiding. These are being reported, and are also being investigated. And based on these investigations, we take appropriate measures or corrective measures, or adjust our procedures, which is a continuous process in improving our safety. We have recently indeed received a writing from the DGCA. We of course take that very serious, and today we're in the process of evaluating the precise note we received from the DGCA, and then we'll determine what is our next step on that. Meanwhile, as I mentioned, we continuously review our procedures, our safety. I mean, we have grown to an airline with 1,800 flights a day. That's, looking at the global size, that is something like the 7th or the 8th largest in the world when it comes to daily departures. So we have a massive operation, and we continuously evaluate how we can keep that operation to the highest safety standards, which Indigo actually is known for all these years.
There's a report which came out a few days back in the Hindu which said that there was pressure on pilots to ensure maximum fuel efficiency, which is possibly why the aircraft are not ideally configured in their flap setting when they make a landing, pilots possibly coming in to save fuel. How would you respond to that?
Well, let me be clear. At the end of the day, always the pilots have the call on what landing configuration they use. And it's at the pilots eventually, it's a pilot's discretion to use the landing configuration and to configure for that. Then, of course, we have internal procedures which are matching to what the industry standards are, which are allowing different variations of operational procedures. And in those operational procedures, we've taken into consideration all possible elements. But at the end of the day, again here, it is the pilot who is deciding what is the precise configuration for landing. And we use the different configurations which are allowed by the aircraft manufacturers.
Do you agree with with the DGCA fine and the action they have taken, or do you believe it's something that you might challenge?
Again, we are reviewing today what exactly is being said. I don't think we should go in the public in sort of commenting what the DGCA said. We're reviewing that now, and based on that, we'll engage with DGCA as per the process, there's a process laid out when you receive such a notice, what you can do, what is the time frame for that, what's the appropriate steps. And I think an airline of our size and our skills should just follow the steps which are pre-described by the DGCA, and we do that as such.
Mr. Elbers, let's talk about the future, because it's exciting for Indigo, isn't it? And I must ask you this, is Indigo looking to acquire twin-aisle long-range jetliners? I'm not talking about the short-term acquisition of 777s. I'm talking about, are we going to see, who knows, A350s or Dreamliners? That was a rumor, in Indigo colors, twin-aisle aircraft in the future.
Yeah. Well, the good news is there's rumors every day. But to your earlier question, I mean, yes, the future is exciting. India today, I would dare to say, with a lot of confidence, actually, is the most vibrant aviation market in the world. Being at the IATA conference in Istanbul 2 months back, all eyes were at India. If you just look at the air show, which recently took place in Paris, there was, of course, the earlier order of Air India, and then Indigo was in a position to order another 500 narrow-body aircraft, Airbus 320 family, which is the highest number ever ordered as a single aircraft type of any airline by Airbus. And again, I think that speaks to the potential of India and speaks to the potential of Indigo. If we look to the geographical position of India, we are very well positioned, not only for the Indian market itself, but also for international travel. And as such, we're expanding very significantly international. Over the next few weeks, we're adding another 6 international destinations. 2 days from now, we start flying Mumbai to Nairobi. It's the first time actually Indigo will be touching on African soil. So look at that from a network perspective. 2 days later, we start our flight to Jakarta. 2 days later, we start our flights into Central Asia from Delhi. Mm-hmm. So we're actually actively building up that network. Then we have Airbus 321 XLR on order as well. They will be coming end of 24, maybe early 25. That will be the next step. They will bring us further into Europe and will bring us also further into Asia. We've kept always all options open for after that. I would like to sort of stick to that position today. We have a firm planning and agenda for our 321 family, for our XLRs, and whatever it comes next, we have not ruled out anything, and we keep all options open towards the future.
In fact, the XLR was my next question. There have been range issues with the A321 XLR. Is Indigo worried about, the orders that you've placed or the faith that you've placed on this variant? Because, for example, Delhi to London direct, on the basis of the reconfiguration or the redesign of the additional fuel tank, some would suggest might be a problem.
Yeah, I've read the very same reports as you're referring to, and of course we're in close contact and communication with Airbus on what's going to be the precise configuration and what's going to be the precise range. And of course, we've looked at these aircraft and we've taken a position for these aircraft based on a certain range. I think it would be a bit premature today to precisely say which routes could be operated and could not be operated. That really depends on Airbus. It also depends actually on our configuration, what's going to be the precise number of seats, what's the routing take place. Having said that, I think there's a lot of routes, even in today's network. Let me come back to the earlier example. We start now flying Mumbai into Nairobi. Mm-hmm. We cannot fly with today's aircraft Delhi into Nairobi. We could fly with the Airbus 321 XLR Delhi Nairobi. So if we park the whole London story for a moment, I think there's still a lot of opportunities in the range of 6 to 7 to 8 hours, which, irrespective of the precise outcome you're referring to, would offer great new opportunities for us to fly out of Delhi, Mumbai, Hyderabad, Bangalore. All these great Indian cities will have a lot of potential for us to further build our network. I mean, take Singapore. We fly out of 7 different cities in India to Singapore. So we could even stretch that further into Indonesia. We start flying now from Mumbai into Jakarta. With the XLR, Delhi, Jakarta could be another option. So we start adding and building on that network international.
But you would agree, Mr. Elbers, that West Europe would be a problem given what we're hearing about the XLR?
I think that's really too early to say that. Mm-hmm. if I were to comment on every speculation in the media, what's going to be the precise range of an aircraft, that would pretty much consume half of my day. So I really prefer to await the definitive outcome of Airbus, get the information from the manufacturer, then run our systems and the exact configuration of our aircraft, and then decide what's going to be the precise range of these aircraft.
A broader question, and I ask because with 1,000 odd aircraft on order, one needs to know this. Does India have the infrastructure to support Indigo's growth?
Well, yeah, that's a very fair question. But I think with this order, and here, I'm actually very pleased what's happening. We have now the new airport in Noida coming up. We'll have the new airport in Navi Mumbai coming up. Existing airports are expanding. Take Goa as an example. The new airport in Goa opened, Goa Mopa Airport, in Jan of this year. I had the privilege of being at the inaugural, and there were quite some concerns. What will happen with the existing airport, and will it reduce, and will it keep the flights, and what does it mean for the local economy, and so on and so forth. The reality is actually that we kept operating pretty much all our existing flights at the existing airport of Goa, and we have added dozens and dozens of flights to the new one. So the investments in infrastructure are now really taking off in India. And rather than looking to each other, airports to airlines and airlines to airports, we have now a firm order book, and not only us, but also Air India. So Indian Airlines are having now a firm order book, which should give the airports enough confidence to start building and expanding the airports. And I guess in the past there may have been a little sort of chicken and egg. Are there enough planes, or is there enough airport capacity? Today it's clear the airlines are embarking on a path of growth, and with that the airports can start helping to create the infrastructure there. And from that angle, actually, I'm very pleased also with all the efforts the government is putting in. And if you take a global perspective, the agenda of the government to move India further onto the global stage, and to I would say its rightful place, and the hosting of the G20 and all the policies attached to that. Many states are reducing their ATF taxes, aligning them. So all these policy changes of the government, the push for the government to open up new airports, the UDAN scheme, that's all helping really to push, I would say, a common agenda forward. And Indigo can only be happy and proud and humble to be part of that agenda and help to implement and bring the country forward.
Mr. Elbers, two questions as we wrap up this discussion. A very passenger-centric sort of question, and I think I'm asking this myself. Will we ever see in-flight entertainment systems on Indigo aircraft?
Again, my standard response to pretty much everything is we're not ruling out anything. Again, Indigo has evolved over time. If you take, for example, when we started this week, we celebrate our 17th anniversary. Think about that. 17 years ago, we had one flight starting, and today we operate 500 routes, 1,800 flights a day, and we welcome this quarter a record of 26 million customers in a quarter. And as recent as May, we had a record of 3 lakh customers a day. So we evolve over time. And with that evolving, we are further upgrading our loyalty program, for example. That's a customer question. We have one today, which is linked to a credit card. We're further developing and evolving that. So I'm not ruling out anything. With that, maybe just a quick reaction. If I see the number of customers on a plane, especially in a digital savvy country as India, who's all having their own phones, some of them even 2, it is actually more likely to develop in that range for domestic flights rather than anything else.
And a final question. 500 aircraft on order. You are the key person involved in all of this. Negotiations must have gone on for months. Were you tense? Were you nervous? Were you worried? My God, we are committing so much. What if the market doesn't really develop? What if aviation turbine fuel goes out of control? Could you share with us some stories that you've not said anywhere else about, the negotiations themselves? I mean, it would have taken a toll on you.
Yeah, well, the good part, and thanks for that more personal angle to the talk. I really appreciate that. The good part here is that at Indigo, and I'm 1 year here now, but at Indigo we have a fantastic team and colleagues working on that. So none of steps like this is a sort of single person operation. There's a vision from the promoter. There's a board which is supporting it, and they're wonderful and very strong and experienced colleagues doing that. So as a team, you embark on such a negotiation. And as every negotiation, you have ups and downs and moments of frustration and moments of happiness. What I can share when I was sitting in Paris with the Indigo team and together with the Airbus leadership and basically presenting there an order of 500, I could only feel extremely proud of what we are doing and the fact that even in the recent visit of the Honorable Prime Minister into Paris and the guest of honor, it just demonstrated and underlined the position of India on that stage. And to be part of that growth story together with all my colleagues at Indigo, it's an humbling and yet very energizing experience.
Mr. Elbers, congratulations. Fantastic quarterly results. And, Indigo and India's plans for the future in aviation, they seem so closely tied. Thank you very much for speaking to us.